Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, Cesar Espino, and you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com. Today, I have a special guest. His name's Ollie Rankin. Hey, Ollie, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks, Cesar. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being here today. So let me give you a little bit of his background. Ollie is a multidisciplinary storyteller and artist who spent 2 decades working at the forefront of the global visual effects industry, from The Lord of the Rings to Alice Through the Looking Glass. He combines his story of creative achievement with a background in computer programming and AI to develop new narrative conventions in interactive media. He is the founder and CEO of Vancouver-based immersive content productions company, and he is now currently doing a lot of things to really encourage people, and he's performing a spoken word poet, musician, comedian, and public speaker. That is amazing. Wow, definitely want to dive into that, Ollie. And before we get started, though, I want to know more about you growing up. Where are you from, and what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from New Zealand originally.
Okay.
I was born in Auckland, New Zealand. I had a bit of an interesting upbringing. The first volume of my autobiography is going to be really really interesting story.
Yeah.
I came from a fairly poor family, a broken family. My father raised me and my sister on his own for most of my youth. We lived in a pretty sort of rough, impoverished neighborhood. Went to a school that I think might have been the worst rated school in the entire city.
Wow.
For high school anyway. But yeah, I think one of the things that I like to remind myself of and to remind others of is that, not everybody that comes from a rough upbringing has the advantages that I did of being a straight white man. So, I think I take a lot of, or I give a lot of credit to the good fortune that I had, that even though, my life didn't look at all privileged, I still benefited from the privilege of being a straight white man. And that certainly is part of my story of how I was able to overcome my rough start in life.
Yeah, definitely. And I always like to start with that question because, again, a lot of times people see who we are now, not realizing and understanding that perhaps, in most cases, there's something that happened in the past. And I always tell people that you have to go through some sort of pain to be able to grow into some sort of purpose, right? And a lot of times you go through pain and you come up with a bigger purpose. If you are able to know how to maneuver around that, because it's not always the same case. Yet being able to go through that and learning through that and going, falling down multiple times, you become who you are now. Which definitely you've done a lot of things for yourself and accomplished a lot nowadays. And so, at which point did you? Where are you living right now?
I'm living in Los Angeles right now, actually.
Okay, awesome, cool. So, at which point did you come to the States?
Most recently, I moved here at Christmas time.
Okay.
I lived in New York for a while back in 2016.
Yep.
But yes, most recently moved here.
Got you. Wait, and what was the? I myself, I'm an immigrant, so I'm just, obviously I was brought here by my parents at an early age, 10 years old. So what was the driving factor for you to come to the States when you did come to the States for the first time? Was that your dad doing that, or was it you already an adult and say, you know what, I want to start a new beginning?
Yeah, so actually this is the third time I've lived in the States.
Okay.
And yes, each time it's been for work,
Gotcha.
for career purposes. So I moved to California, moved to the Bay Area back in 2003 to work on the Matrix sequels.
Nice.
And then in 2016, I moved to New York because my partner had been headhunted by a company there. And I was in conversations with a couple of different companies to join. So yeah, again, it was sort of a career move. And then the same happened again this time. My partner, she got hired by Apple. So that led us to relocate here again.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. And tell me a little bit about, getting out of high school and maybe going into college. Did you had any major challenges that you had to face?
I mean, I paid my own way through college with a combination of working a couple of part-time jobs and taking out student loans. I lived quite a long distance from the college. I stayed living with my father so that I could, wouldn't have to pay rent.
Yeah.
But it meant that I was commuting up to an hour and a half each
Wow.
way each day to get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the biggest probably challenge going from my high school into college was just that my high school didn't really try and push people towards college. It was very much I think the objective was to try and prevent the kids from ending up in jail. So they
Yeah.
weren't really encouraging sort of academic pursuits.
Gotcha. Yeah. What do you consider to be one of your major lessons, things you've learned growing up, not having your mom around and, just with a single dad and growing up in maybe, like you said, one of the worst schools? What would have been maybe one of the biggest lessons you've learned up to this point from that?
Well, yeah, I think I'll go back to something that you were sort of touching on earlier. I think, not only is it important that each of us experiences some hardship and difficulty in our lives, because if you haven't had to fight for something, if you haven't had to overcome obstacles, then you just take it for granted that everything is going to go your way. And we can look at examples of people in the world who are born to wealthy families and just kind of bumble their way through life and never really contribute anything. Or you compare those to people that have had a tougher upbringing and they've had to fight for everything that they've got. They've had to work hard for it and they've earned it, and they tend to have a better worldview and more empathetic. And I think the other thing that is worth kind of noting is that every single crappy thing that has ever happened to me is necessary for me to be the person that I am today. So, there's no point dwelling on the bad things that have happened in your life, because those have been part of the formation of who you are now.
Yeah, I love that, and it kind of goes back to maybe along those lines, and just taking that further. A lot of people look at a failure or a negative impact in your life as just really being bad, and sometimes people take it to the point where it's just a curse in your journey, right? And I like how you say the fact that any kind of dwelling that happened in your past, is part of that growth. It's part of who you are now, right? And so how do you embrace that though, right? Because I know that even going through a very shady time or bad time, people tend to play that victim or have the victim mentality, play the victim role, and you don't know how to come out of that. And so how do you kind of work through those challenges to say, you know what, there's got to be a better purpose, instead of focusing on like, man, my life is falling apart. There's nothing better coming out of this.
Yeah, I think what I've taken comfort in is recognizing that no matter how bad my life has ever felt, there are millions and millions of people out there whose situation is much worse than mine.
Mm.
And that, rather than taking it personally when things are going badly for me, recognizing that actually the system that we live under has a lot of these sort of flaws built into it, a lot of the, systemic bias and racism and wealth inequality. These are the system that are stacked against everybody. And so that is kind of what has, rather than feeling sorry for myself, it has made me want to fight on behalf of everybody to improve the system.
Yeah, I think that's so critical, and I just want to reemphasize on that. I never saw it that way, and yet it makes perfect sense, though, that even if you're going through a challenging time, perhaps there's somebody else in this entire world that might be having it worse than you are. You might be thinking to yourself, like, I don't know how I'm gonna pay my rent today. Well, there's people that don't even have a place to live or sleep on, right? And so when you think about it from that perspective, it definitely might open up other opportunities and say, well, there's other people that are having it harder than I am, yet they're getting through. I can definitely get through this myself. And so I love how, putting that into content can definitely help our listeners take that into a different aspect, right? The other thing you talked about, and I have a comment here from you, which I definitely want you to expand upon. And you say diversity and inclusion, recognizing and reinforcing of the equality of all people is a critical part of the solution to every single problem that humanity faces right now. And so can you elaborate on that? Because I think it's so true, right? I mean, it comes down to that. And we tend to create these separations. And I feel, in my own personal opinion, that a lot of times the news is doing that by trying to diversify and separate everything going on in the world. And we've seen that very recently. I'm also here in Los Angeles, so you've seen that all over the world happening. So anyways, can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you look at the major crises that are facing us right now, the most sort of obvious ones are the COVID-19 pandemic and climate crisis. And both of them are disproportionately affecting minorities, people of color, the poor, and they're examples of how the systemic inequality is causing disproportionately bad outcomes to happen to a certain sector of society. And I think, once we recognize, or once we stop thinking of people that are different from us as others and start thinking of ourselves all as a collective humanity, then we realize that something that hurts another person is also hurting us. And I think the pandemic has been such an amazing teaching moment for that, because what we have learned, and not everybody has chosen to take this lesson from it, but one thing that it has taught us is that it is in the interests of all people for all people to have access to healthcare, because any person who doesn't have access to healthcare increases the risk of the whole population for this pandemic. So I think that's just a fine example of it, but it applies also to pollution and climate change. The effects of those are mostly being felt in poor and minority communities, and the rich people who are most in a position to do something about it, because they don't feel like it's affecting them, and because they don't necessarily care enough about the people who it is affecting, they're able to carry on with the status quo. So I think, we need to have a reckoning. We need to have people recognize that it's hurting them for other people to suffer, and it's going to cause all of future generations to suffer if we don't do something about it now.
Yeah, and then the other point to that, and I think even you can see it from the pandemic, and you mentioned this, I think it's like anything else, right? A lot of times we tend to see something negative, and we forget to find or look at what is the positive that can come out of this, right? And so that can be it's definitely applicable to pandemic. Instead of focusing on the negative, let's focus on the positive. What can I learn from this? What can come out of this? What will be the good thing that's going to come out of this? And I think that's the same thing in anything that we do in our lives, right? A lot of times, again, going through a little bit of pain there's something to be learned. There's a lesson to be learned from that. If you're, you're applying for this job and you didn't get that job, there's something to be learned from that. Maybe you have to be better prepared. If you're trying to become an entrepreneur and things are not going well, maybe there's things that you have to do. And so a lot of times I tend to tell people is that focus on what is the positive outcome or what are you trying to accomplish. And even if it doesn't work out that way, let's look at what can I learn from this? What is the lesson to be learned from this? And, it kind of goes back to the other point too, is like whatever happened in the past or is happening to you, there's no point of dwelling on that. Let's see, whatever you're going to led you to be in this place right now, right? And so talking about that though, for you in your journey, definitely you've done some great work. How did you land it in that creative work in the industry?
Yeah, again, I think as much as I would like to take credit for all of the good fortune that I've had in my career, a lot of it does come down to blind luck. I was studying AI before it was cool back in the mid 90s, and because I was fascinated by it, I thought the idea of computer intelligence was really inspiring. But there weren't very interesting careers that you could have in AI at the time. But when Peter Jackson announced he was making Lord of the Rings, I suddenly thought I knew what I wanted to be when I grow up for the first time.
Yeah.
And I applied to work there. I tried to make it sound like some of the computer graphics and film studies work that I'd done at university or at college was relevant to what they were doing, but of course it wasn't. They were looking for people with specific skill sets. Foolishly, because I didn't think that AI had anything to do with filmmaking, I didn't even mention that I had this AI background when I applied for the job. Little did I know there was a guy working there writing an AI-based system for doing all of the big battle sequences, and he was struggling to find people who had any sort of background in AI. And then I happened to become friends with somebody on an electronic music emailing list who had lunch with that guy one day, and the pieces of the puzzle fell into place.
Yeah, and that's definitely amazing. I mean, even with your you going and learning about that. I mean, I believe that sometimes the universe or whatever great power people believe upon would put you in that path and kind of align things for you, even when you don't see it. And as long as you continue to ask for that, I think you're going to end up getting that, right? So I want to talk about your nonprofit. So you have this nonprofit, From the Trees to the Stars, and you are an advocate and activist for diversity, fairness, and sustainability through your nonprofit. So tell me how that came about in terms of, having your nonprofit and some of the things that you're doing through that.
Yeah, sure. It began when I had a bit of a realization, sort of probably 12 years ago now, and I was trying to understand why a few different sort of puzzles, sort of universal puzzles, like why haven't we seen alien intelligence or any conclusive evidence of alien intelligence? And one of the questions for that, or one of the sort of answers to that question, is that maybe there is some really, really difficult thing that has to be overcome between life evolving on a planet and that life leading to intelligence and to technology that enables interstellar travel. And so maybe the reason that we haven't seen any other aliens or any aliens is that even though there might have been life evolved on millions of other planets in the history of the universe, maybe somewhere in the evolution from life beginning to interstellar travel, some really, really hard thing prevented them from those other species from reaching that level of technological sophistication. And then I start looking at the history of humanity, and we wonder, have we already passed that really, really hard challenge, or is that still in our future? Is it really, really unlikely for even a civilization as sophisticated as ours to develop? Or is it the next step where that civilization has to kind of pull together to reach beyond its own planet. And I'm somebody who, I'm not very spiritual, but
Mhm.
I do believe that, I believe that life is a sort of a game, is a challenge that we as a species, as an organism, are trying to figure out everything that we can about the universe. Our brains, our memories, our DNA, all of them are ways of encoding the knowledge that we have acquired through millions of years of evolution and sort of hundreds and thousands of years of cultural evolution. And I personally know that I'm not going to live to see the culmination of this, when we ultimately could truly understand the universe.
Mhm.
But I feel like myself and our current generation, we owe it to our ancestors and we owe it to our descendants to keep that exploration going, to keep understanding the universe better, to keep on exploring and discovering and learning. And so my sort of life's mission is to do whatever I can to help make sure that humanity carries on indefinitely.
Mm.
And in order for humanity to carry on indefinitely, we need to not kill ourselves off in war. We need to not kill ourselves off in the climate Armageddon. We need to not let ourselves die out by a pandemic. And so that's kind of where From the Trees to the Stars
Mm.
developed. It's this idea that competition got us down from the trees, but only cooperation can take us to the stars.
Mm.
And so all of my thinking on this is around, how do we make sure that humans work together better and that we build a world and a set of systems that will allow us to survive forever.
Yeah. I love what you just mentioned about competition. Take us to I'm probably gonna butcher it a little bit, but I love that right there because I think it's very powerful. Competition takes us to the trees, and cooperation takes us to the stars. And that's amazing, actually, when you think about it. Uh, and I want to reinforce that in different content is that a lot of times when we are working on anything, and I want to know your experience on that, is that uh, you've heard this term before when people say your network is your net worth, right? And so it comes back to what you just mentioned: cooperation, cooperating, working together, edifying each other, doing a lot of that. So what is your take on that? Obviously it seems like you embrace that, yet how has that helped you in your journey as the person you are in your career, in terms of really reaching higher goals or achieving more in your life?
Yeah, well, I think I look at the way that a lot of the things in our human civilization are structured. Democracy is kind of a competition. Capitalism is a kind of a competition, and they're both sort of based loosely on this idea that if you have competing forces against each other, they will push each other to excel. And we have all these sort of historic examples like the space race or these different arms races, the nuclear arms race, where you have these competitions that have led to innovation and advancement, but it's come at a great cost. Whereas when you have cooperation, when you share ideas, when you build on other people's ideas, and more importantly, when you build on ideas from people that are different than you, you're actually able to achieve a lot more. Aristotle said the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but I actually think that the whole is only greater than the sum of its parts if those parts are different from each other.
Mm.
Because if you just bring together a lot of the same thing, you cannot expand outside that sort of box of thinking. Whereas you bring in different people with different ideas, different backgrounds. So part of my mission in life is to surround myself with people who are different from me, and I believe that has helped me to achieve greater success than I would be if I just surrounded myself with people who are like me.
Yeah, definitely. So part of your mission with your nonprofit, obviously, is to to see things, unveil further than that. Is there any other things that you have as part of your mission, or part of the things that you want to accomplish, as leaving behind, in terms of your legacy?
Um, I mean, I guess one of the things that I'm really focusing on at the moment, because because I believe that this cooperation is so important, and because I believe that the things that are holding us back from cooperation at the moment are sort of individualism
Mm.
and tribalism. So individualism being this idea that it's all about me, 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 and I should put my own interests above anybody else's, and I should, do whatever I can to achieve my own success at whatever cost to anybody else. And then tribalism, this idea that, that we should be supporting people like us, and that anything that benefits somebody who's different from us is somehow coming at a cost to us. Those two sort of mentalities, I think, are the most destructive, and the things that are most preventing us from all working together, and from the sort of this cooperation taking us to the stars.
Yeah.
So I'm focusing on ways to use virtual reality to allow people to see the world through others' eyes. And then when you can see the world through somebody else's eyes, then maybe you will be less judgmental of their actions, their choices. When you realize that in the same situation, you would make the same choices and the same actions yourself. So that's one thing that I'm really focusing on at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of, I think that a lot of times we as people need to continue to work on ourselves and just really create what I consider to be some sort of habits or rituals to just kind of get us through either the difficult times and times that are unprecedented, right? So, do you have any specific rituals or habits that you do on a day-to-day basis just to carry you out through the days?
Not really, not sort of structured. It's not like I get up in
Hmm.
the morning and have a list of things that I do, but I
Yeah.
I do every day, not in a structured way, but I do every day spend time thinking about, how lucky I am, what I've got to be
Mm.
grateful for in my life, and making sure that I reach out to people that I care about, and reminding them that I love them. And I think, as you were saying before about how important our networks are,
Hmm.
we are social beings, and the thing that gives us our greatest strength is our relationships with other people. And especially in trying times like this, we need to remember to remind each other that we love each other, that we care for each other, that we're supporting each other.
Yeah, definitely. And I totally agree with that. As of the recording of this, we're kind of in the, I don't know, we're in the end of it or whatever we might be, but we're going through still to the pandemic of COVID-19. So we've been isolated, and in quarantine. And so I think, I personally miss going out to like networking events and just meeting people and just kind of having that, because definitely, I think there's a bigger critical factor of that when you are able to be in a group of people, uh, doing more than just being isolated. And I totally agree with the whole idea of um, being grateful, right? Understanding and having that. And whether it's in a structured or non-structured way, I think if you do that on a daily basis, you can definitely put yourself in a different place, right? So let me ask you this: how would you define success?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I grew up with a very sort of strict definition of success. My father, wanted to do whatever he could to make me be successful according to the sort of this measure of success that we have in Western society. So, he wanted me to be on a level with like Bono, or sort of a music superstar or a sports superstar or something like a household name, and to anything less than that wouldn't have been successful. Um, Myself, I've my in my life, I've found that actually happiness and feeling of belonging is the most important. And part of my feeling of happiness and belonging is tied to those sort of more traditional ideas of success. I definitely, we all feel good about ourselves when we succeed at something, when we're financially secure. Um, but yeah, I think that the most important thing is to feel happy and to feel like you belong.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And I feel like again, this just we have this sort of societal individualistic idea of success, but we measure our societies at the moment by these sort of capitalist ideas of GDP, or
Mm.
by measuring the success of the most successful individuals in our society. But I think we should be measuring our society by how happy and how much belonging even the poorest and most isolated members of our society feel.
Yeah, no, definitely, I totally agree with you. I think uh, the success is defined, individual at an individual level. It comes down to being happy, and I've seen people that clearly have no monetary value perhaps in their lives, yet they seem to be the most happiest people. And that, I think, speaks a lot of volume when it comes down to being successful in their own special way and in their own life. So yeah, that is definitely one thing that I've learned throughout the years too, is like, it's not just about the money or that capital gains, right? It's more beyond that, and is what is that bigger purpose and things you're trying to accomplish, right?
Exactly. And I think it would also be good if there was a way that we sort of subtracted from people's success according to how much they exploit other people or the planet.
Mm,
Because we maybe we call an entrepreneur very successful, they're a billionaire, um, but we don't measure into their success how many people they had to stomp over to get
yeah,
there, and how much the planet they had to destroy to get there.
yeah. Well, and you actually made a good point. I think a lot of people tend to see the overnight success, or all of a sudden this person's like making it, and they don't see all the years and maybe decades of hard work that went through it to be able to get there. And I think, again, it goes back to that original point of you're going through some pain, and you're growing from that pain to a purposeful meaning at the end of the day, right? So what are some of the things that you're working on right now in the near future?
Yeah, so my main focus right now actually is, and this is going to be going live in just under 2 weeks' time. We're taking part of the Glastonbury Music Festival from the UK. It's one of the biggest music festivals in the world, and we are hosting it in virtual reality.
Mm,
And so this is it's sort of a three-pronged effort. One, it's to make the event be able to be hosted even though we're in the middle of a pandemic.
mm-hmm,
Two, it's to reduce the carbon footprint,
mm,
and the sort of the pollution footprint and the destructive footprint of the event. And three, it's to make it accessible to more people. So if your listeners are interested, losthorizonfestival.com is the website to go to. Tickets are free. You can attend in VR or on a PC, or there'll be an app that you can download in the next few days to attend the event as well.
mm.
But we're also raising money for Amnesty International and The Big Issue, which is a homeless newspaper in London.
Got you. Awesome. No, that's awesome. Ollie, I have a couple more questions for you before I let you go. If people wanted to connect with you, how can they connect with you?
The best way to reach me is LinkedIn, probably. So yeah,
Okay.
you look me up, Ollie Rankin on LinkedIn. I'm not very active on Twitter, but I am there.
Yeah. With all the social media, it's kind of hard to keep up with all of them. So for sure, I can relate to that.
Okay.
Um, and then in terms of one thing that comes to mind, and I want to get your point of view because I think you have very good points of view and ideas. Do you believe that once this pandemic is probably 100% done, we as human beings, as one kind, uh, do we adjust to a new beginning? Do we go back to the old ways? It's a mixture of in between. Like, how do you foresee that? Because I think that definitely is also creating some sort of maybe not necessarily fear, just uncertainty of, well, what's it gonna be moving forward, right? I mean, even right now, I go to the store, and the fact that in LA, well, now in California, you have to wear a mask, and it's like, okay, is this the new beginning? And like, is this gonna be it? Like, whether you go to sit down restaurants or whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
like, is this the new norm, right? I want to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, the metaphor that I like to use is that this is actually like the best opportunity that we've had in our lifetimes, and probably the last opportunity that we have in our lifetimes to make real fundamental change to the way that our society works. The pandemic has caused the train to come off the rails, and it's going to take a lot of work to put it back on the rails. So let's put it back on the right rails instead of, let's put it onto the right set of rails instead of the old wrong ones that it was on.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this from the trees to the stars thing for over a decade, and as much as I've been optimistic and as much as I've been pushing for change, I've never seen as big of an opportunity for fundamental change as we have right now. So I think that what happens in the next 6 months is going to determine the future of humanity. And if we can come together, if we can unite around a change for social and racial justice, if we can unite around a change for more sustainable business and personal practices, then humanity has a great future in store.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And the last thing I have for you, if any of our listeners or viewers are going through some sort of challenge right now, what will be one advice or two that you can give them that they can start implementing now to start overcoming that challenge?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'm going to say is reach out and talk to people, because it's so easy when you're stuck in your own challenge and you think that it only affects you and you think that you're on your own trying to solve it. Just remember that you do have a network of people who care about you and who will want to help and support you, and will and just, yeah, again, reach out to people who have different points of view than yours, because it's also very easy to get stuck in your way at looking at the problem that you're facing, and not realize that there are completely different ways that the problem can be looked at. And only by talking to somebody else and getting their input can you see those new perspectives.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that's Ali. Thank you so much. It's very, very good interview. I love spending time with you today. Is there anything else that you might want to say to our listeners or viewers before I let you go?
You know what, Caesar? I can't think of anything else. I really enjoyed this conversation too. Thanks so much for having me on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and definitely can't wait to see a lot of the things that you're working on, especially now that we're neighbors. I know that now, so definitely we can follow you on that. And for the rest of you guys, do me a favor, please make sure you like, share, and comment this podcast. Please make sure that you come here and just comment and leave us some of your feedback, and tell everybody about it. We can be found on every single platform where you can hear your favorite podcast show. Again, this is You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. I will see you at the next episode of the show. Have a good day. Bye.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.